The coffee maker gurgled like it was on its last breath, which seemed fitting for a Tuesday morning in suburban hell. I stood in my kitchen, watching Clara butter her toast with surgical precision and the warmth of a funeral director. 22 years of marriage had taught me to read her moods like weather patterns, and today felt like a hurricane brewing. "David, we need to talk about finances," she said without looking up. Classic Clara, dropping emotional bombs while performing mundane tasks like discussing the end of the world over breakfast cereal. "What about them?" I asked, though I already knew this conversation would end with me writing checks for things I didn't want. "If we ever split up, you know I'd be entitled to half of everything." She said it casually, like mentioning the weather. "The house, your salary, your retirement, half." I sipped my coffee and studied her face. Clara had always been beautiful in that sharp, calculated way that made weak men stupid and smart men cautious. But there was something different in her eyes today, a coldness that went beyond her usual manipulation tactics. "If you say so," I replied with a shrug. She looked genuinely surprised, probably expecting me to panic or beg. That was Clara's specialty, watching people scramble while she held all the cards. But I'd learned years ago that the best response to her power plays was complete indifference. "I'm serious, David. Legally, I'd get half. I heard you the first time. Don't you care? Should I? Are you planning something I should know about?" "Of course not." She stood up, smoothing her designer skirt, the one I'd paid for naturally. "I'm just saying, hypothetically, if things went south between us. Then you'd take half." "Got it." I turned back to my coffee. "Have a wonderful day at work, sweetheart." She stared at me for a long moment, clearly frustrated that I wasn't taking the bait. Then she grabbed her Hermes purse, also my money, and click-clacked toward the door in those expensive heels that cost more than most people's rent. The door slammed with just enough force to rattle the windows. Her signature move when reality didn't bend to her expectations. I waited until her BMW pulled out of the driveway, before allowing myself to smile. Clara thought she was playing three-dimensional chess while I stumbled through checkers. What she didn't realize was that I'd stopped playing her games entirely. I'd just been watching, waiting, and taking notes. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jake. "Coffee? I've got news." Jake Patterson had been my anchor since college, back when we both thought we'd revolutionize the world with our engineering degrees. Now he sold insurance and I designed software for a mid-sized tech company. Neither of us had changed the world, but we'd both gotten very good at reading people's bullshit. I met Jake at Murphy's Diner, our usual spot for what he called intelligence briefings, and I called therapy sessions with bacon. "You look like someone just told you your team lost the championship," Jake said as I slid into our regular booth. "Thanks. You always know exactly what to say to brighten my day." "Seriously, what's wrong? You've got that 1,000-yard stare thing happening." I told him about Clara's breakfast performance, including her casual mention of taking half my assets in a hypothetical divorce. Jake listened with the intensity of a confession priest, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. "Dude," he said when I finished, "that wasn't hypothetical talk. That was reconnaissance." "Yeah, I figured that out." "So what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Clara's name flashed on the screen like a warning light. "Hey," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "David, my card was declined at Nordstrom. There must be some kind of banking error." I could hear the barely controlled rage in her voice, that special tone she reserved for when the universe had the audacity to inconvenience her. "That's weird. Did you call the bank?" "I shouldn't have to call anyone. Just fix it, now." "I'll look into it when I get home from work." "No, fix it now. I'm standing here looking like an idiot in front of the sales staff." "Clara, I'm having lunch. I can't just—" The line went dead. Jake raised an eyebrow while I stared at my phone. "Let me guess, credit card drama?" "Something like that." "You didn't actually freeze the accounts, did you?" I smiled and took a sip of coffee. If I did, that would be pretty cold-hearted, wouldn't it? "David, you magnificent bastard." That afternoon, I was leaving work when I decided to take a different route home. As I drove past the strip mall near our house, I spotted Clara's BMW in the parking lot behind Murphy's Diner. Curious about what had brought her to this part of town, I parked and walked around the building. What I found made my blood freeze. Clara was standing next to a red Mustang, pressed against the driver's side door, while a tall, dark-haired man stood close enough to count her eyelashes. His hand rested possessively on her waist, and they were both laughing like teenagers sharing secrets. "I can't believe David actually thinks I'd stay with him if we divorced," Clara was saying, her voice carrying clearly across the empty lot. "The prenup might say one thing, but courts always side with the wife." "Especially when she's as smart as you," the man replied, leaning closer. "Once you get half his money, we can finally take those weekend trips we've been talking about." My vision went white around the edges. Weekend trips, funded by my salary, while she was still married to me. "Mark, you're terrible," Clara laughed, but she was clearly enjoying every second. Though I have to admit, using his credit cards for our little getaways has been fun. "Just wait until it's legal. No more sneaking around, no more excuses about working late." They kissed then, and I watched my wife of 22 years embrace another man while discussing how to spend my money after she destroyed our marriage. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't just planning adultery, they were planning financial fraud. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, watching them make plans to systematically dismantle my life. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and sat there until my hands stopped shaking. Strangely, I wasn't angry. I should have been furious, heartbroken, devastated. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. Clara had just handed me everything I needed to know about where I stood in her life, and more importantly, what I needed to do about it. That evening, Clara came home acting like the perfect wife. She asked about my day, prepared dinner with a smile, and chatted about mundane topics as if she hadn't spent her afternoon planning our divorce with her boyfriend. "How was work today?" she asked, setting a plate of salmon in front of me with the grace of a 5-star restaurant server. "Productive. How was yours?" "Oh, the usual office politics and spreadsheet drama." She sat down across from me with a smile that would have fooled a polygraph machine 6 hours ago. I ate my dinner, which was excellent, because Clara had always been a good cook, and made appropriate small talk, all while thinking about what I'd witnessed. She wasn't just cheating, she was strategically planning to financially devastate me while pretending to be a loving wife. The level of calculation required for that kind of deception was genuinely impressive. After dinner, I excused myself to my home office under the pretense of checking work emails. Instead, I went to the filing cabinet where we kept important documents and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years: our prenuptial agreement. I'd forgotten most of the details. The prenup had been written 22 years ago at Clara's father's insistence. He'd been a successful businessman who understood the importance of protecting assets. At the time, I'd thought it was overkill. Clara and I were young and in love. What could go wrong? As I read through the document now, one clause made me smile for the first time all day. In the event that either party engages in extramarital relations during the course of the marriage, said party forfeits all claims to marital assets, spousal support, and property division. Harold Montgomery had been a very smart man. I photographed every page of the prenup with my phone, then put the document back exactly where I'd found it. Tomorrow, I'd call a divorce lawyer. Tonight, I'd let Clara think she was still in control of this game. "David?" Clara called from the living room. "Are you coming to watch TV?" "Be right there, honey," I called back, saving the photos to a secure folder. I joined her on the couch, the expensive leather sectional she'd insisted we needed, and she immediately snuggled against me like the loving wife she was pretending to be. We watched some mindless sitcom while I thought about Mark's hands on her waist and their laughter about funding their romance with my credit cards. "David," she said during a commercial break, her voice taking on that carefully casual tone she used when fishing for information, "what would you do if I ever asked for a divorce?" I looked down at her. This woman I'd loved and provided for and trusted completely for over 2 decades. I'd give you exactly what you deserve. She smiled, clearly thinking she'd gotten the answer she wanted. You're so sweet. Most men would probably fight it. Most men probably would. But not you? If you say so? That night, as Clara slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about Mark and their planned weekend getaways, I stared at the ceiling and made my plans. She'd said she'd take half if we split. I'd said if she said so. But Clara had made one crucial mistake in her calculations. She'd assumed I didn't know about the adultery clause in our prenup. She'd assumed I was still the same passive, accommodating husband who'd let her walk all over him for 20 years. She was about to discover that assumptions could be very expensive. I woke up Wednesday morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, all from Clara. The messages started apologetic and evolved through bargaining, anger, and finally landed on threats. My personal favorite was, "You'll regret this, David. I know things about you that could ruin your career." I made coffee and scrolled through the digital meltdown while wondering what secrets Clara thought she possessed. I paid my taxes, drove the speed limit, and hadn't cheated on my wife. My biggest crime was probably that overdue library book from last year. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery truck and a very tired-looking driver. "David Morrison?" he asked when I opened the door. "That's me. Divorce papers, sign here, please." I stared at the envelope. The return address showed Helena, Goldstein and Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of, but whose letterhead screamed expensive legal firepower. "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "I haven't been served yet." Lady paid extra for rush service, said it was urgent. Clara had apparently decided to escalate things quickly. The papers were comprehensive. She was asking for spousal support, half the assets, exclusive use of the house, and payment of her legal fees. Basically, she wanted me to fund my own destruction. I called my lawyer immediately. Richard Steinberg had handled my business contracts for years, but I'd never needed his family law expertise before. "She beat us to it," I told him when he answered. "Not necessarily a problem. Sometimes being served first works in our favor. What's she asking for?" I read him the list. Richard whistled low. "Standard opening gambit for someone who thinks they hold all the cards. They're trying to establish her as the injured party who needs financial protection." "What's our response?" "We file our counter-petition this afternoon, then we start documenting the adultery." "About that?" I told him about yesterday's parking lot discovery. "Perfect. Do you have photos?" "Not yet, but I know where to find them." "Get some. Legally, of course. Public places, no breaking and entering, no wiretapping. Just good old-fashioned documentation." That evening, I drove past the apartment complex where I'd seen Mark's car the night before. Sure enough, both the red Mustang and Clara's BMW were parked in front of Building C. I found a spot across the street with a clear view and settled in to wait. At 9:47 p.m., Clara and Mark emerged from the building together. They walked to their cars like people who'd done this routine many times before, comfortable, familiar, completely at ease. Mark put his arm around Clara's waist as they walked, and she leaned into him with the kind of natural intimacy that takes time to develop. I took photos with my phone. The lighting wasn't perfect, but you could clearly see Clara and Mark together, leaving what was obviously his apartment at almost 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. They talked for a few minutes by their cars, then Mark kissed her goodnight. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss that lasted long enough for me to take several photos. Clara drove away first, and Mark watched until her taillights disappeared before going back inside. I followed Clara home, staying well back. She pulled into our driveway like she was returning from a book club meeting or dinner with girlfriends. I parked down the street and watched her let herself into our house, the house I paid for, where she'd sleep in our bed after spending the evening with her boyfriend. The photos weren't smoking gun evidence, but they were a start. Combined with what I'd overheard yesterday, they painted a clear picture of ongoing adultery. Thursday morning brought another surprise. a black Mercedes sedan in my driveway, and two men in expensive suits standing on my porch like Mormons with law degrees. "David Morrison?" the taller one asked as I approached. "Depends who's asking. I'm Thomas Helena, and this is my associate, Michael Goldstein. We represent your wife." "Ex-wife, and I don't talk to other people's lawyers without my lawyer present. We just want to have a civilized conversation," Helena said. He was smooth, polished, and radiated the kind of confidence that came from winning ugly divorces for wealthy clients. "About what?" "About resolving this matter quickly and amicably, without dragging both of you through an expensive court battle." "I'm listening. Your wife is willing to be reasonable. She'll take the house and half your liquid assets, and in exchange, she'll waive any claim to spousal support." I almost laughed out loud. "That's her definition of reasonable?" "Mr. Morrison, I think you should consider that your wife has significant leverage in this situation." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that she's prepared to make this very unpleasant for you if you choose to fight." Goldstein spoke up for the first time. "We know about the frozen bank accounts, the hostile environment you created in the home. A judge won't look favorably on that kind of behavior." "Interesting theory. What else do you know?" Helena smiled like a shark scenting blood. "We know you work at TechFlow Solutions. We know your boss, Jennifer Chen, values stability and discretion in her employees. We know you're up for a promotion next month." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They were going to try to sabotage my career if I didn't cooperate. "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "Not at all. We're simply pointing out that some battles aren't worth fighting." "Gentlemen," I said, pulling out my phone, "I'm going to call my lawyer now. You can either wait here while I do that, or you can get off my property. Your choice." They exchanged glances, then Helena handed me a business card. "Think about our offer, Mr. Morrison. It won't be available indefinitely. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves." After they left, I called Richard immediately. "They came to your house?" he asked. "That's either desperate or incredibly arrogant." "Maybe both. They threatened my job." "Empty threat. They can't interfere with your employment without risking harassment charges. But it tells us they're worried." "About what?" "About what we might find if we keep digging. People don't threaten unless they're scared." That night, I decided to do some more surveillance. I parked across from Mark's apartment building again and waited. At 11:15 p.m., Clara's BMW pulled into the lot. She parked next to the Mustang and hurried inside like she was late for an appointment. I waited 2 hours. When Clara finally emerged, she looked rumpled and satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn. Mark walked her to her car, kissed her goodnight again, and watched her drive away. I had photos, timestamps, and a clear pattern of behavior. But as I drove home, I realized I needed more than just evidence of the affair. I needed Clara to incriminate herself, to admit what she was doing in a way that couldn't be disputed. The next evening, I was grilling dinner on my back patio when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Mark's red Mustang. This should be interesting. Mark walked to my front door with the swagger of a man who thought he held all the cards. He knocked like he was doing me a favor by announcing his presence. I opened the door with a smile. "Mark, what an unexpected pleasure. We need to talk." "Do we? About what?" "About this whole situation, about Clara." "What about her?" "Look, I know you're angry, but maybe we can work something out." I stepped aside and gestured him in. "Sure, come into my house and tell me how we can work out you screwing my wife." He had the decency to look uncomfortable as he entered. I led him to the living room and offered him a drink, which he accepted gratefully. "David, I want you to know that Clara and I never meant for this to happen." "Really? It was an accident?" "What I mean is, we didn't plan for things to develop this way." "How did you plan for them to develop?" "I don't know. We connected, you know." "I'm sure you did. When did this connection begin?" "About 6 months ago." 6 months. Clara had been planning this for half a year while pretending to be a loving wife. "And how exactly did you connect?" "We met at a coffee shop, started talking. One thing led to another." "One thing being coffee, another thing being adultery." Mark's face reddened. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it? You started screwing a married woman. Seems pretty simple to me." "David, look, I know this is hard for you." "Hard for me?" Mark, you're sleeping with my wife in your apartment while she burns through my paycheck on your dinners. The only hard part for me is deciding if you're clueless or just breathtakingly arrogant. I'm trying to be reasonable here. Reasonable would have been not sleeping with another man's wife. Mark set down his drink and leaned forward. David, Clara's going to divorce you whether I'm in the picture or not. Is she? Yes. And when she does, she's going to get half of everything you have. You seem pretty confident about that. I'm confident. Clara's lawyer says the prenup won't hold up in court. I smiled. Clara's lawyer told you that? Yeah, said judges don't like prenups that leave women with nothing. Interesting legal theory. Did Clara's lawyer mention the adultery clause? Mark's expression changed. What adultery clause? The one that says if either spouse cheats, they forfeit all claims to marital assets. The color drained from his face. That's not. Clara said the prenup was just standard stuff. Did she? What else did Clara tell you? She said she'd get half of everything in the divorce. And what did you think that meant for you? We talked about traveling together, maybe buying a place. With my money. With her money. From the divorce settlement. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Mark, just to be clear, you're admitting that you and Clara plan to use my assets she would gain through divorce, to fund your relationship. He realized what was happening and tried to backtrack. I didn't say that. You just said you talked about traveling and buying a place with money she'd get from divorcing me. I meant her money, her share. Her share of what? Of your... He stopped, finally understanding the trap he'd walked into. Of my assets, which she told you she'd get half of when she divorced me. Mark stood up abruptly. I think I should go. That's probably wise, but Mark? Yeah? You might want to ask Clara to show you the actual prenup. Specifically Clause 7. I think you'll find it very educational. After he left, I sat in my living room and reviewed the recording. Mark had just admitted on tape that he and Clara had planned to use my money she expected to get through divorce, to fund their relationship. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was close enough. Friday morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by Clara's BMW. She was sitting in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly. Even through the windshield, I could see she was furious. I made coffee and watched her through the kitchen window. After 20 minutes, she got out of the car and marched to my front door like a general leading a charge. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door. Now. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Coffee? Don't play games with me, David. What did you say to Mark? We had a nice chat about your relationship. What kind of chat? The kind where he admitted you two planned to spend my money after you divorced me. Her face went pale. He didn't say that. Actually, he did. I have it recorded. You recorded him? In my own house, talking about his affair with my wife, perfectly legal. Clara pushed past me into the house. She looked like she hadn't slept, and her usually perfect appearance was showing cracks, smudged makeup, wrinkled clothes, hair that hadn't seen a professional stylist in days. David, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been screwing Mark for 6 months while planning to divorce me and take half my assets. You've been using my credit cards to fund your dates. You've been lying to my face every single day. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Clara. You're a cheating wife who got caught. She started crying then, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. You've ruined everything. I've ruined everything. Clara, you're the one who destroyed our marriage. Mark won't even talk to me now. He thinks I lied to him about the prenup. You did lie to him about the prenup. I didn't know about the adultery clause. Bullshit. Your father insisted on that prenup. He made sure you understood every clause before you signed it. That was 22 years ago. The law doesn't have an expiration date, Clara. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing dramatically. For a moment, I felt the old, familiar urge to comfort her, to make everything okay. Then I remembered yesterday's parking lot scene and Mark's hands on her waist. David, please, can't we work this out? Work what out? Our marriage. We could go to counseling, try to rebuild trust. Clara, you're pregnant. She stopped crying and stared at me. What? Mark told me. 6 weeks along, he said. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Clara's face went through several expressions: shock, calculation, panic, then back to tears. "It's not what you think," she said finally. "Really? Because I think you got pregnant with your boyfriend's baby while married to me? What part of that am I misunderstanding? David, please, I can explain." "The only explanation I need is in the prenup. Adultery equals forfeiture of assets. It's really very simple." "But the baby is not my problem." "How can you be so cold? How can you be so calculating? Clara, you planned this entire thing. The affair, the divorce, the asset grab. You brought your boyfriend to my house. You used my money to fund your cheating. And now you want sympathy because your plan backfired? I never planned for this to happen. You just accidentally had an affair. You just accidentally discussed taking half my money. You just accidentally got pregnant with another man's baby." She had no answer for that. "Clara, I want you out of my house. You can't kick me out, I live here." "Not anymore. You can stay with your mother or Mark or whoever else wants to deal with your drama. But you're not staying here." "I'll call the police." "Go ahead. Tell them your husband kicked you out after he discovered your 6-month affair and recorded your boyfriend admitting they planned to steal his money." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if she had any cards left to play. "David, what if I told you I'd end things with Mark? What if I said we could start over? I'd say you're 6 months and 1 pregnancy too late. But we could try—" "Clara, stop. It's over. We're getting divorced, you're getting nothing, and I'm moving on with my life." "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake I made was not filing for divorce 6 months ago when this affair started." She gathered her purse and headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. "David?" "What?" "I hope you're happy. For the first time in years, I think I might be—" After she left, I called Richard to update him on the morning's developments. She admitted to the affair? Not directly, but she didn't deny it when I confronted her with the evidence. And the pregnancy? 6 weeks along, which means it happened during the affair, not during our marriage. "David, this changes everything. We need to file for emergency relief immediately." "What kind of relief?" "Exclusive use of the marital home, temporary restraining order preventing her from accessing joint accounts, and a court order requiring DNA testing to establish paternity." "Can we get all that? With the evidence we have?" "Absolutely." That afternoon, I was working from home when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Mark's Mustang again, but this time Clara got out of the passenger seat. They both looked grim as they approached my front door. I opened it before they could knock. "Let me guess," I said. "You're here to negotiate." "We want to talk," Clara said. "All 3 of us," Mark added. "How modern, come on in." I led them to the living room, where they sat on the couch like defendants waiting for sentencing. I took my favorite chair and looked at them expectantly. "David," Clara began, "we want to apologize." "Do you?" "Yes. What we did was wrong and we hurt you and we're sorry." "Okay, anything else?" Mark cleared his throat. "We also want to discuss how to move forward." "I'm listening." "Look," Mark said, lowering his voice as if he were the reasonable one in the room. "I know this whole thing is messy, but Clara's pregnant and the baby needs stability." "Absolutely. The baby deserves a father who takes responsibility for his actions." "That's what I'm trying to do. By asking me to raise your child?" Mark's face reddened. "That's not what I said." "Isn't it? Because I can't think of any other reason you'd be here." Clara spoke up. "David, we were thinking that maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "Maybe you could help us financially just until Mark gets back on his feet." I started laughing, not polite chuckling, but deep, genuine laughter that made both of them uncomfortable. "You want me to give you money?" I said when I could speak again. "Just temporarily," Clara said quickly, "to help you and your boyfriend raise the baby you conceived while cheating on me." "When you put it like that, it sounds insane." "Yes, it does." Mark leaned forward. "David, I know how this looks, but it looks like 2 people who made terrible choices and now want someone else to pay for the consequences." "That's not fair," Clara said. "Fair? Clara, you cheated on me for 6 months, got pregnant with another man's baby, and tried to steal half my assets. Now you want me to financially support your new family? And you think I'm being unfair? The baby didn't choose this situation, Mark said. You're right. The baby didn't choose to have a father who sleeps with married women and a mother who commits adultery. But that's not my fault. So you're just going to let us struggle? I'm going to let you be responsible for your own lives. Novel concept, I know. Clara started crying again. David, I'm scared. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone. You have Mark. Mark doesn't have any money. Then maybe Mark should get a job. I'm trying, Mark said defensively. But the economy has nothing to do with personal responsibility. You got a married woman pregnant. You need to figure out how to support that child. And if we can't? Then you'll learn what millions of other parents learn every day, how to sacrifice for your children. They sat in silence for a moment, and I could see them realizing that their plan had completely collapsed. David, Clara said finally, what would it take for you to help us? Nothing. There's nothing you could offer me that would make me want to clean up your mess. What if I signed away all my rights to the divorce settlement? You don't have any rights to sign away. The prenup already covers that. What if I agreed to shared custody of the baby? I stared at her. Clara, that's not my baby. But legally nothing. We're getting a DNA test that will prove I'm not the father. And then what? Then you and Mark figure out how to be parents without my money. Mark stood up abruptly. This is bullshit. You're being vindictive. Am I? Or am I just refusing to be a sucker? You could help us if you wanted to. I could do a lot of things. I could also light my money on fire or donate it to people who actually deserve it. Fine, Mark said, but don't expect this to be easy for you either. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You think you can just walk away from all this without consequences? What consequences? You're going to make my life difficult. Mark, you're unemployed, about to be a father, and completely dependent on a woman who just lost access to her husband's money. I'm not the one who should be worried about consequences. They left without another word, but I could see the anger in their faces. They'd expected me to be the same pushover husband who'd enabled Clara for 20 years. Instead, they'd found someone who was done playing their games. That evening, I poured myself a bourbon and sat on my back patio, watching the sunset. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. The worst had already happened, and I was still standing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. How's the war going? I texted back, I think I'm winning. Good. Luna says to tell you that karma's a bitch and Clara's about to find that out. I smiled and raised my glass to the sky. Here's to karma. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Richard had filed a comprehensive motion requesting exclusive use of the marital home, enforcement of the prenup, and immediate DNA testing to establish paternity. This is it, he told me as we walked into the courthouse. Today we find out if justice still exists. Clara was already there with her legal team, but she looked different. Gone was the confident woman who'd threatened to take half my assets. In her place sat someone who looked defeated before the battle even began. Judge Patricia Romano was a stern woman in her 60s, with gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen every dirty trick in the divorce playbook. This is an emergency hearing regarding Morrison versus Morrison, she began. Mrs. Morrison is requesting temporary spousal support and exclusive use of the marital home. Mr. Morrison is requesting enforcement of the prenuptial agreement. Let's start with Mrs. Morrison's petition. Helena stood up. Your Honor, my client is pregnant and has been effectively abandoned by her husband. She has no income, no place to live, and is facing the prospect of raising a child alone. And why was she abandoned? Judge Romano asked. Because of irreconcilable differences that developed in the marriage. Richard stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Morrison wasn't abandoned. She was asked to leave the marital home after her husband discovered her 6-month extramarital affair. A murmur went through the courtroom. Clara's face went pale. Can you prove this affair? Judge Romano asked. We can, Your Honor. We have photographic evidence, recorded admissions, and witness testimony. Helena jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. These are unsubstantiated allegations designed to smear my client's character. They're substantiated by evidence, Your Honor, Richard replied calmly. Evidence we're prepared to present. Judge Romano looked at Clara. Mrs. Morrison, are you claiming that your husband is the father of your unborn child? Clara stood up slowly. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Morrison, you dispute this? I stood up. I do, Your Honor. We haven't been intimate in over 2 months, and she's been living with another man. Your Honor, Helena interjected, my client categorically denies any extramarital relationship. Richard opened his briefcase. Your Honor, I have photos of Mrs. Morrison and one Mark Stevens entering and leaving his apartment together on multiple occasions. I have recordings of Mr. Stevens discussing their plan to use Mr. Morrison's assets to fund their relationship, and I have documented evidence of Mrs. Morrison using marital funds for dates with Mr. Stevens. Judge Romano looked at Clara. Mrs. Morrison, do you know a Mark Stevens? Clara's composure cracked. Yes, Your Honor. What is your relationship with him? He's a friend. A friend who you visit overnight at his apartment? Clara looked at her lawyers, but they had no answers. Your Honor, she said finally, my marriage was troubled long before I met Mark. That's not what we're discussing. We're discussing adultery and paternity. Are you willing to submit to a DNA test? Long pause. Your Honor, I don't think that's necessary. I think it's very necessary. Mr. Morrison, are you willing to submit to a DNA test? Absolutely, Your Honor. Judge Romano made notes. I'm ordering DNA testing for all parties, including Mr. Stevens. Mrs. Morrison, you have 30 days to vacate the marital home. Mr. Morrison will continue paying mortgage and utilities during that time. What about temporary support, my Helena asked. Judge Romano pulled out the prenup and read it carefully. This is a well-drafted document with clear language about adultery. Unless you can prove fraud or coercion, I see no reason why it shouldn't be enforceable. Your Honor, enforcing this agreement would leave my client destitute while pregnant. That's a consequence of her choices, not a failure of the legal system. Mrs. Morrison chose to engage in extramarital relations despite signing an agreement that explicitly forbade such behavior. Clara sat down heavily, tears streaming down her face. Temporary support is denied. If the DNA test shows Mr. Morrison is the father, we'll revisit obligations. If not, Mrs. Morrison's pregnancy is not Mr. Morrison's responsibility. After the judge left, Clara sat staring at the table while her lawyers whispered urgently around her. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt empty. 22 years of marriage, reduced to legal proceedings and DNA tests. Richard packed up with satisfaction. That went better than expected. It's not over yet. No, but we're in control now. The DNA test will prove the child isn't yours, the prenup will be enforced, and Clara will be on her own. As we walked to the parking garage, I heard Clara call my name. David, wait. I turned around. She was standing alone in the courthouse lobby. Can we talk just for a minute? Richard shook his head, but I nodded. I'll meet you outside. Clara and I walked to a quiet corner. 22 years, she said. It doesn't have to end like this. It ended when you started sleeping with Mark. I made mistakes, but we could still work this out. How? You're pregnant with another man's baby. We could raise the child together. People do it all the time. I stared at her. Clara, yesterday you wanted me to financially support you and Mark. Today you want me to take you back and raise his baby. What will you want tomorrow? I'm scared, David. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone. You have Mark. Mark doesn't want the baby. He said he's not ready to be a father. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you got pregnant. She started crying harder. I don't know how to support myself. I haven't worked in 15 years. Then you'll learn. Millions of people do it every day. That's cruel. That's reality. Clara, you made your choices. Now you get to live with them. She looked up at me with red eyes. You really have changed. Have I? Or am I just finally being honest about who I always was? The David I married would have helped me. The David you married was a sucker who let you walk all over him for 20 years. I'm not that guy anymore. She nodded slowly. I guess this is it then. I guess it is. For what it's worth, I did love you once. I know, I loved you too. She walked away, and I watched until she disappeared around a corner. The DNA test results came back 2 weeks later. Richard called with the news. It's official, you're not the father. I never thought I was. Mark Stevens is the biological father. This clears the way for finalizing the divorce. When? I'll file the final papers today. You should be officially divorced within 30 days. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. That evening, I was grilling dinner when Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, waved me over to the fence. David, dear, I hope everything's working out for you. Better than expected, thanks. I'm glad, and I wanted you to know no one's been lurking around your house lately. That's good news. Although I did see Clara drive by yesterday, she slowed down but didn't stop. She looked sad. It's been difficult for everyone. Well, you're handling it with remarkable grace. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. It took less than 10 minutes. Judge Romano reviewed the settlement agreement, confirmed both parties had signed voluntarily, and asked if we had objections. No objections, Your Honor, Richard said. No objections, Clara's lawyer echoed. Then by the power vested in me, I hereby grant the dissolution of marriage between David Morrison and Clara Morrison. 22 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. Clara stood and walked toward the exit without looking at me. But just before she reached the door, she stopped and turned back. David. Yeah? I really did love you. I hope you know that. I know. And I'm sorry for all of it. I know that too. She nodded once, then walked out of the courtroom and out of my life. 3 months later, I was having dinner at Rossetti's when I saw a familiar face. Rachel, Clara's sister, was eating alone at a table by the window. I walked over. Rachel, how are you? David, how wonderful to see you. Mind if I sit? Please. How's Clara doing? I asked. Better than expected, actually. Really? She got a job at a daycare center. Doesn't pay much, but it's something. And she found a small apartment she can afford. What about the baby? Born last month, a little girl. Clara seems happy about it. That's good. David, Clara asked me to tell you something if I ever saw you. What? She said to tell you thank you. For what? For not rescuing her. She said it was the kindest thing you could have done, even though it didn't feel kind at the time. I thought about that. Maybe enabling Clara's irresponsibility for another 20 years would have been crueler than forcing her to grow up. How about Mark? Pleaded guilty to armed robbery. Got 3 years in prison. That's unfortunate. Is it? Guy abandoned his pregnant girlfriend to commit crimes. Prison might be the best thing for him. As I drove home, I thought about what Rachel had said. Clara was working, supporting herself, and raising her daughter. Mark was in prison, facing consequences, and I was free. When I got home, I poured myself a bourbon and sat on my back patio. The house was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. No one was spending my money on things I didn't want. No one was lying to me. No one was threatening to take half of everything I'd worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Luna wants to set you up with her cousin. You interested? I thought about it, then texted back, maybe, but not yet. When? When I'm ready to be someone's husband again instead of just Clara's ex-husband. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely responsible for my own happiness. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. I finished my bourbon and went inside. Tomorrow was Saturday, and I had no plans except to do whatever I wanted. I could sleep late, work in the garage, read a book, or drive somewhere I'd never been. The possibilities were endless, and they were all mine. Clara had said she'd take half if we split. I'd said if she said so. Turns out, half of nothing is still nothing, but all of something, even if it's smaller than you expected, is everything you need. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, finally free.